I'm concerned about the threshold that will be adjusted. This threshold will be adjusted every third year after the rule takes effect. I mean, one of the things that we're able to do here from a public policy perspective, I mean, this is not a bill that we're getting ready to vote for. This isn't something that will be implemented in a what I would consider a non-legislative way. One of the things that we can do when it comes to bureaucracy, we at least have the opportunity as the people's voice to ask questions like we're doing today, to actually bring stakeholders and just start to talk about what effect it might have on our economy. My concern is that just simply adopting a rule and then having it take effect, ad infinitum, just continue to increase, will not allow us that opportunity. Is that a concern that any of you have when you look at the rule and you see that this could go on, every third year, just continue to be increased and more of an increased cost without knowing what the economy is going to be any of those years, unless, we all seem to have kind of a unicorn thought of what the economy is going to be like, but we don't have to go back into too far of history to see how those things can change. So if somebody could just talk about that part of the rule, please.
I'll be happy to take the first stab at it. At least a number of years ago, some of you, I believe, were there at the time when the legislature decided that increases in unemployment compensation for the maximum benefit amount would not go up. You capped it because of concerns about the growth in the economy and other things. That is the sort of thing that I think you're talking about. My other concern is that whether or not it is appropriate on an economic basis for this regulation to continue to escalate, the numbers will probably continue to be different than the federal numbers. So my non-compliance trap will continue potentially ad infinitum, because I doubt very much that we're going to guess at the same exact number that the feds are if they ever get a regulation through that is no longer stayed. So yes, I've got that concern.
Yeah, and from a practical standpoint, just in terms of getting back to the institutional perspective for private institutions across the state and also state institutions, although funded by tax dollars, is higher education. There are existential threats across the country. For those of you who have universities in your districts, small private schools in your districts, I'm confident you understand the struggles that they are dealing with. We see institutions closing and struggling to stay alive across the state with lots of existential threats coming from community college and the debt crisis and all of these things. Again, these institutions typically are not flush with cash, and I can speak from my own institution's perspective. So when we see a rule like this with every year we're going to have to continue adding this cost to our budget, we have to also, on the flip side of that ledger, figure out what we're cutting. And at some point, the only things left to cut are, again, student services and how much we're able to do for our students. So we're asking them to pay more, increase what they're paying to go to college, and we're giving them less because we have to continue to budget for these continued increases in the salaries that we frankly we can't afford and we don't have the funding for.
Well, and if I could take that from a human service standpoint just a little further. I heard references today from the Secretary of average increases of 2.7% per year, if I'm not mistaken. There are years we haven't given increases to our staff where we have unfunded mandates that we're adapting and responding to. There are organizations, human services organizations in Pennsylvania that haven't had increase in their rates for over 20 years. We haven't had increases in most of our rates in over 10. Probably quite a bit longer than that. So while there's obviously increases in the cost of living, and now we're looking at a legislation that's going to impose corrections on a regular basis, there's no way human services industries can sustain that. We're already starting out of the gate in the hole on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.